This is Sporting Life.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Timeform and Sporting Life Racing podcast. I'm your host Ben Linfoot this week, joined by Ed Chamberlin, Graham Cunningham, Billy Nash and David Johnson to discuss all things Cheltenham Festival. The Cheltenham Festival is done and dusted for another year, and we are going to go through this in 6 segments. The experience, the stars, the shocks, the disappointments, the spring, and the next festival. Thinking about 2026 already. So, without further ado, Ed, I'm going to come to you first for the experience because you were very much there all 4 days. How was it?
Still recovering. Honestly, I actually spoke to my daughter who's working in Kenya at the minute. She's 18, and she said, "Dad, it was mental." And they were all watching on some hooky VPN, I think, out there as you do as teenagers. And they just said they aren't racing fans. They just said they couldn't stop watching it. It was just unrelentingly mental, is the way they described it. And I think that's probably about right.
Did you say Kenya or Benidorm?
They're in Kenya. It was raining in Benidorm one morning, which made me laugh.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was, and I'm looking forward to talking about it because it'll be therapeutic. Honestly, it's just like I've watched some of it back. And it's like, did that really happen? From an ITV point of view, which obviously I can tell you all about, it's, Cheltenham's great for us, always has been. Like Royal Ascots and Yorks and Goodwoods, our struggles are Aintree, the Grand National, will never get a huge audience probably again, and the Derby, which struggles to resonate, but Cheltenham does. Sports fans just absolutely love it and seemed to not be able to get enough of it. I mean, for us we showed 24 races and 20 of them got over 1 million people watching, which is pretty cool. And it served up just compelling drama. It really was. And we had, and this doesn't mean a lot to me, but I'm told it's good. We had 41 million views of our social media. 41 million. And to be honest, a lot of that's not the racing. Number one was Peter Crouch with Ollie, Maura Higgins with Ruby, and the Gemma Collins interview that had me with my head in my hands. But I do get it. I do get the importance of it. And yeah, an extraordinary experience, all of it. And I can't believe some of it happened. I mean, that champion hurdle, honestly, I'm still getting to grips with it now, 8 days later.
Yeah, JC, you were there, weren't you? How did you find the experience in terms of the crowd that was there and the customer experience?
Yeah, I thought it was a memorable week morning all. Hope everyone's recovering.
How did you see?
Memorable on so many levels. The weather was pretty good, albeit cold. The drama was astonishing. Shocks, what might have been, a few flashes of genuine brilliance, and a timely reminder that, after a few years of predictability, by and large, you cannot take anything for granted in jump racing. The experience, I don't think, personally, I need to dwell too long on this now. Ed's touched on the fact that the Cheltenham Festival is popular, extremely popular on telly. And it's not as popular as it used to be with the people who pay good money to go there. Now, there are tons of reasons for that. You'll have read and heard about them all. But I hope they can turn it around. I'm not certain they can in the short term. Longer term, maybe, medium term. But one little quibble that maybe not many people have mentioned. If you're charging £2.50 for people to pick up tickets on the day, tickets they've already bought, you're doing something wrong. So bin that, get the customer experience better again. Tuesday was really good walking around if you wanted to get a drink or something to eat, etc. That's the plus point of smaller crowds. Comfort is heightened. But overall, it's the Cheltenham Festival. It's the best we've got. It's fantastic. And I enjoyed it thoroughly from start to finish, albeit with 1 or 2 minor quibbles, and they're only minor.
You have got to be there, though. I'm sorry. It's fine that it's good on telly, whatever it is. It always has been. You've got to be there. That roar to the Gold Cup is like nothing else, honestly.
People are voting with the feet, Ed, and the wallets. They are. It's. I know it's from a price point of view, it stacks up pretty level with a lot of big events. But a lot of big events have really increased their comfort and match day experience for people. And until latterly, Cheltenham haven't, so they're playing catch up now.
before I get onto the stars and the shocks and the disappointments, I'm going to put the new schedule in this section of experience, David. And how did you think the tweaks to the race program went?
Yeah, I think most people would say that what happened had a positive effect. Obviously,
Most people, not everyone, DJ.
well, maybe, but it would have been a real blow when you think what horses might have been taken out of the Broadway and the Arkle to make the Turners. I mean, those two races struggled to stack up as it was. So if you wanted another Grade 1 in there over the intermediate trip, I think we'd have really been struggling. So
You're right. I thought we might have had an apology, David, from Hello today.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm going to come on to that point in a second. I'll let DJ make his point there first.
So yeah, I think most of the changes were relatively positive, and the new novice handicap, or the one that sort of replaced the Turners and was a throwback to what used to exist back in the days of 0 to 140, I think that was obviously a positive. It attracted some really good horses. I think the top weight was rated in excess of 150. So yeah, whether it's gone far enough, there's still that question about the Mares' Hurdle and whether it needs to make Connections have a real decision to make as to whether, if they've got a Grade 1 mare, they need to give £7 to the other mares in the Mares' Hurdle, or choose to receive it in the Champion Hurdle. I think that's coming, isn't it? I think Lossiemouth diverting has really brought that to the head, and I don't think they'll be able to sweep it under the carpet for another year. So we'll see. But I think the changes were positive. They maybe haven't gone quite far enough, and we can still keep moving the goalposts to get where we need to be.
Billy, the floor is yours.
On that point, Scoop, I'm not so sure the changes were positive. I don't think they had made a massive impact. Crunching a few numbers. Just crunching a few numbers, right? Last year, 2024, the Arkle had 10 runners. There was 6 in the Brown Advisory. There was 11 in the Turners. That's a total of 27 runners. This year, you had 5 in the Arkle, 7 in the Brown Advisory. In those two races, only 2 horses trained in the UK. And you had 11 in the Turners, 7 of which were trained in the UK. So that's a total of 31 horses. So just 4, there was 4 more runners this year in the 3 races than there was last year, because one of the races was a handicap. In 2025, out of those 3 novice chase races, you had 9 horses trained in the UK. In 2024, you had 13. So even with the addition of a handicap, you still had less UK trained horses this year than you had last year, which is a bigger issue. I mean, obviously the horse population in the UK is a massive problem. The other change that I don't think had a positive effect was the new qualification rules for handicap hurdles. It's 16 runners in the county hurdle this year, the smallest field this century. And as well as that, you had 3 horses that got into the race off marks in the 120s, which would have been unheard of 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm not convinced those changes were positive. Something had to be done, and I'm sure they'll tweak a bit more this year. But like I said, I don't think they had the massive impact that people were hoping they would have.
You must admit, it felt like the handicap changes were sort of made so Willie Mullins couldn't win a county hurdle with a horse that had run 3 times in France, and it didn't stop him winning it anyway. So, I'm not sure it had the desired effect
last year. So
Billy's right to point out that the lack of useful, smart, high quality British horses is it's alarming now. And even further down the chain, so county hurdle, 16 runner race, as Billy said, 6 British runners. Now, I haven't got all the data ahead of me, but I know there were a right lot of eligibles. So many eligibles. Horses who were in action in the Imperial Cup just a few days before. And some of it is explicable, and some of it is just impossible to understand. Not a single runner in the Brown Advisory from Britain. Not one. It's pretty staggering. Now, I know we're shy of good horses, and I know that the jukebox man was injured, etc. But it's sort of halfway beginning to think that a few trainers have given up the ghost.
I just jotted down a few numbers last week. Now, I stand corrected on this, but there's 13 Grade 1s at the festival, right? I think, if my calculations are correct, there was a total of 50 UK trained horses ran in those 13 races. And out of that 50, 8 were in the bumper and 8 were in the Albert Bartlett. So, I mean, that just paints a pretty grim picture, I would have thought.
It does. Yeah, I couldn't really understand the county hurdle field being 16 runners. I don't know if they're running scared from the Irish trained horses or what, but there was, like you say, there was so many that could have run in that race.
Well, going back to the Tuesday, the Ultima, not British novices finished first and second in that race. So the Changing Man obviously won the Reynoldstown on his previous start. So if you really want to sort of look at how that we can ensure that the novices are stacked to the great degree as what we want, maybe it is time to look again at these handicaps and whether we do decide not to let the novices in. Then, as you guys have just been mentioning there about the county, if you do that, you are going to take runners out of those races.
Just to add to that, something I wrote in at the end of the festival in terms of improvers and the changes. Mayertown bolted up in the Ultima. Put your hands together, bolted up in the Fred Winter. 80 Calais, emphatic in the National Hunt Chase. Jimmy DeSoy bolted up in the Coral Cup. Colwell Potter, runaway winner in the Jack Richards. And Jaguar, dominant in the Plate. All those 6 horses, and you can add in Johnny who was unlucky not to win the Kimure, had all had the absolute minimum number of runs to qualify for those races. So you can nudge it up one and nudge it up one, but improving horses are improving horses. And there's six handicap winners who'd had the minimum number of runs. And to be honest, they all bolted in.
It did. Just before we leave this section, Ed, how did you feel about the feature race going off at 4 o'clock? That looked
that worked.
Change.
That worked. That worked for sure. And it improved the build-up, I felt, having the big race at 4 o'clock, and it felt less after the Lord's Mayor's show after the big race. The one day I struggled with, if I'm honest, was Gold Cup Day. And I know you can put on anything on Gold Cup Day and it'll probably be in the top of the turnover with Sky Bet and so on and so forth. But that Mayor's Chase on Friday just felt to me like a complete non-event. I struggled to get up for that or show any interest in it, and I wanted to come straight off it and move on afterwards. But
that's an outcome from 4 days, though, Ed, isn't it? If you've got 28 races, 1 or 2 of them are going to be,
I just think you could move one of those competitive handicaps from Thursday onto Friday, because then I think the turnover on that, I think, could go through the roof. Be it the Plate or one of those races on Gold Cup Day would really improve that card, I think. The Mayor's Chase, to me, was the one big non-event of the week.
Isn't it amazing, Ben? Isn't it amazing? We're going to go on to the shocks point of view. It's not impossible that both the Champion Hurdle winner and the Gold Cup winner could have been otherwise engaged on the day. And then we come to that Champion Hurdle. Nobody really mentioned it, but when Constitution Hill came down 4 out, both State Man and Golden Ace were within 2 feet of being brought down by him. It was just that sort of week from start to finish.
Yeah, pretty chaotic. That is the experience and schedule and all that done and dusted. So we're going to get on to section 2 now, the stars of the show. And I think we'll start with the Gold Cup. And I know the way you're thinking, Billy.
Yeah, I must admit, didn't really see it coming. I didn't think he'd beat Galopin Des Champs, but like most people, I just thought the writing was on the wall from Galopin Des Champs for a very long way out. He was never in the position that I expected him to be in. He just didn't look like he was ever comfortable. He was too far back, too wide, and I just think he couldn't go. He just looked like a horse that couldn't go the gallop, which is surprising because, the 9 times out of 10 you'd expect him to be able to lie up with a high senior without any difficulty. So I think he probably deserves plenty of credit for finishing second the way the race turned out. But take nothing away from the winner, who was very impressive on the day. He's clearly an improving horse. He was clearly trained and brought along all season with this race, possibly the Grand National, but certainly a big spring target in mind. And he delivered on the big day, like a lot of Gavin Cromwell horses tend to do. So he's only a 7-year-old. You could certainly see him being around in this grade for a long time. But I wouldn't write off the second horse, Galopin Des Champs. If it does come up soft next year in the Gold Cup, there is still a chance he could get that elusive third Gold Cup. He still ran to a very high level to finish second, even though I don't think, and we didn't think at time form that he was at his best. But you look at what's coming up behind them. There's not an awful lot. So you look at the Brown Advisory of Lecky Watson. Maybe Caldwell Potter or Jaguar can make the step up to Grade 1 company next year. But there doesn't seem to be a deep pool of staying chasers. So I would expect those two, I know the way you're thinking, Galopin Deschamps, to be bang there again this time next year.
Really? Do you think both with Galopin, Gold Cup and Factifile Ryanair, I think we were all sort of asleep at the wheel slightly in the potential effect of spring ground, weren't we?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. It certainly affected Galopin. Factifile seemed to come alive on it, and it had the opposite effect on Galopin. So yeah, it's. I suppose it happens every year at Cheltenham. There is always the possibility that you have all these horses running on soft ground for the winter, and all of a sudden Cheltenham arrives and the ground is drier, and results change and things. But yeah, it certainly affected both the winner of the Gold Cup and the winner of the Ryanair. It had a positive effect on the two of them.
It's fascinating going forward, JP McManus, particularly with, I know the way you're thinking, and Factifile, in terms of the routes that these two go heading into next season, because Factifile was amazing in the Ryanair, and he could be a future Gold Cup horse himself.
I would have asked David, though, first of all, and David tweeted this, and it's a very canny point, that if the plan not to run, I know your way you're thinking, remember, they took him out of this race a few weeks ago, out of the run. If they carried on with that and hadn't run him, David, people would have been hailing Galopin as a 3-time Gold Cup winner and an emphatic one at that, wouldn't they?
Well, they would. It's always if, isn't it? But I don't think Galopin Deschamps was that far below form. His time for racing into this race was 169. I think his master rating is still 175. He wasn't at his best, but I don't think he was that far below form. And I'm just wondering, is it that, I know he's not particularly old, he's only a 9-year-old, but how many times have we seen at the festival, we've got horses that have been minded as the season goes on. They've never really had it put up to them, and then they almost get old overnight. We see these champions, to a lesser extent, it happened with Tiupu, earlier in the week. And, think back to the likes of Barracuda when he was chasing another Stayers hurdle. He looked unbeatable going into it. And the young guns, when they get there and serve it up to him, they just raise their game to a higher level. And I'd be surprised, having won 2 Gold Cups, lost a third. I'd be amazed if Galopin Deschamps can come back and win it again next year.
Against that, the one horse he's been likened to probably more than any is Courtauld Star. And he was he the first horse, I think, to win a Gold Cup, lose one and get it back? Certainly in a very small club. So now he has to emulate Courtauld in another way.
Yes. Ed, just going on to Factifile, that was a hell of a performance in the Ryanair, and it gives JP such a strong hand.
Yeah, early on I was a bit worried about him because he was jumping slightly to his right. And Mark Walsh, you could sense, was dying to get in. And the jockey boys on the podium were talking about it a lot. I mean, there is your King George winner. I mean, honestly, because he'll be even better going right-handed. Kempton will be absolutely perfect for him. He's got so much speed, Scoop, and it's been quite well documented. Alice, who was at the top of the hill, waiting to speak to Mark Walsh. I mean, he was getting quicker as he went past him. He'd have been on the high street if they didn't have the railings to stop them at the top of that hill. I mean, honestly, that was an immense performance. And he's a King George winner if ever I saw one.
Time was spectacular as well, wasn't it? Yeah. It was 20 lengths faster than Corwell Potter and 25 faster than Jaguar over the same course and distance. So it's hard to pick any sort of holes in that performance.
Noel George doesn't talk up those horses, does he? I read too much into his quotes about Stencil and then Illet Francais, I think.
Yeah. Needs to show me something, Noel George. Needs to show me something after that week.
DJ, was the performance of the week on time form ratings Factifile? Did he get the highest rating of the week?
I think he's rated 174 on the back of this, which is the same as what we've got the Gold Cup winner running to. So
right, okay.
It'd be really interesting to see what they end up doing with those 2 horses at Punchestown, won't they? Because obviously Factifile, there isn't a 2.5 mile Grade 1 at Punchestown. You'd have to either go up to 3 or potentially even back to 2. I think Allaho went back to 2 one year, didn't he? And then up to 3 another one. So they've got options. They've got options. Well, they've got John Bon, the owner, over 2.5, haven't they?
Yeah,
so, and Spillane's Tower as well. Remember him? I think he was going to entry somewhere, wasn't he? So this, we talked last year about the strength of what JP McManus had in terms of these staying chasers, and it certainly delivered this year in the end, didn't he? And everyone says, "Oh, it's a shame Factor File didn't run in the Gold Cup," but JP McManus, he did run 2 second season chasers in the Gold Cup anyway.
All academic now, but you'd love to hear the conversation WhatsApp trail that took place and saying, "Yeah, let's take I Know Your Way thinking out the Gold Cup. We don't need him in there." But it seems very strange now, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It certainly does.
Billy,
I think he surprised them. I think he surprised them at Leopardstown that day.
Maybe.
I think that was an immense performance when you watch back where he came from, because I'm sure the Grand National might have been the aim at that point, and he could have got closer.
We probably haven't touched on how good a training performance that was. Was it it's a throwback, wasn't it? We're so used now to seeing these horses, and we expect them to deliver A1 every time they turn up. That's the price that we expect trainers and owners to go for, because we don't mind them not turning up as much as what they used to. Whereas with I Know Your Way, you're thinking it was a throwback. He turns up half fit first time out, really easy to back, and just every time he ran, he got closer and closer and closer. And then here he is on the day that really matters, and he's better than ever. And
to nick another of David's tweets, now we know why bookies couldn't keep the punters off him in the Kim Muir last year.
Yeah, some good thing that day.
Billy, while we're talking about stars of the show, let's have a word for Henry de Bromhead, because he struggled a little bit during the deep midwinter, but he had his team primed once again for Cheltenham, and they all ran well, and he got his just reward with Bob Ollinger in the stayers hurdle.
Yeah, and let's not forget Rachel Blackmore, because she hasn't had the best of seasons, and obviously she missed a big chunk of it with injury. But for me, Ride of the Week was Bob Ollinger in the stairs hurdle. I thought she was absolutely brilliant on him. He's not the easiest, and she just delivered him at the perfect moment. It was probably a race that played to his strengths, because they didn't go very quick. It suited Bob Ollinger better than Tehupa. It wasn't a real test of stamina. And again, the fact that it was quicker ground would have suited him better. But I thought she gave him an excellent ride. Like you said, Henry de Bromhead, he just seems to do this year in, year out. We question how well the horses are running. They seem to have a dip in form midwinter, but they're always back, fit and firing, and absolutely flying for Cheltenham. Unfortunately, he also had Air of Entitlement in fantastic form, because she chinned my nap 6.5, who I must admit, I had money in the bank scoop jumping the last. But again, another fantastic ride from Rachel, delivered her to win right on the line. Fine big mare. There's plenty of potential in her. It was only her second or third run over flight, so I think she could improve a fair bit, and she'll be back next year hopefully for bigger targets.
Cromwell and de Bromhead, I mean, their horses ran lights out, didn't they? In terms of consistency and getting your horses to peak for the big week, they worked right from start to finish. If they weren't winning, they were going really close and running lifetime bests, and that's really telling. 104 in running, Billy, 6.5. I backed as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's supposed to be a bit of a frustrating week for Cromwell, didn't it? At one stage, I think he had 5 seconds, including
something like that,
6.5, who looked home at house. So I know the way you're thinking. Got the job done for him in the end. More Irish success, Ed, and what a spectacular story this was, with Marine Nationale winning the champion chase.
Honestly, it was the strangest experience being there, Scoop. It was like, I'm not a religious person, but something was going on. It was just extraordinary. And then we went off air after Marine Nationale and Jazzy Matty, suddenly the sky went dark, and there was this big dark cloud over us, and it was just very, very moving, very, as if a script had been written up there. It was extraordinary. And it was a great performance. It was a shame, the start was a mess. Starts were topical last week, and it all went wrong for John Bond from the off. And Marine Nationale was excellent, really excellent. And Sean Flanagan went from zero to hero, because I backed Vanilla in the cross country, and with absolutely seething away that played out. And then he goes to win the champion chase half an hour later, and then spoke extremely well. And there were two people, as I said, were the people of the week last week, and I really meant it. One was John Hunt, for obvious reasons, and the second was Charlotte Giles, for the way she conducted herself afterwards. I mean, she was so brave, honestly, and then got a hug from the Queen. And
that's Michael O'Sullivan's
girlfriend,
yeah.
And I'll say it again, you had to be there. You had to be there. It was an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, that was a crazy day, wasn't it? The Wednesday with both Marine Nationale and Jazzy Matty winning. Other stars of the show, David. Who was your top novice last week? Let's get on to the novices.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the New Lion, and I think if we're talking about potential ride of the week, I'd have Harry Skelton's effort on him right up there. Fine margins, it could have all gone wrong for him, couldn't it, in a similar way to how it did for Stateman, but he probably did need that kind of jump at the last, and the New Lion came up for him, and that was already after he'd snuck up the inside and saved ground on the turn as well. So I thought that was a really good ride, and it looks like it should be a pretty strong piece of novice form. It's always the case, isn't it, when the horses that we thought had run well beforehand do so and come clear, that you're convinced, oh, well, it's got to be good form because it's gone just as the way I thought it would. But it does look like it's going to be a strong piece of form, that. And I think the three horses are probably, or potentially could all end up going different ways next year. I think the New Lion will probably go the champion hurdle route. They'll try that, won't they? The third will end up, I think, going over a fence, and maybe the yellow clay, they might be tempted to try and turn him into stayer's hurdle horse. That might be an interesting route to go down with him, but I thought that was a really strong race.
Can I ask a question across the board?
Go on, GC.
Would Kopek de Board have gone in this year's champion hurdle?
He'd have won it easily.
I think.
On the time, he'd have won very easily.
Yeah. I think.
Who knows? He'd have probably got bought down either 4 hours or at the last.
That's it. I mean,
he was impressive, wasn't he, Kopek?
He was very good. I thought, yeah. And I think he was very good, despite the way the race worked out. To be honest, because I'm sure if Paul Townend could have ridden that, and I'm sure thinking about it beforehand, he wouldn't have been in front as early as he was. Kind of fluffed the last as well, and still won really well. I think he's he's got a massive engine, that horse. It'll be very interesting to see what they do with him. I assume they'll go chasing with him. But yeah, he's a massive talent, I think.
Was Willie not insinuating that he might just keep him over hurdles for another season, Kopek de Bars? That's what I sort of took from last week. But
perhaps, yeah. Yeah, like, he'd be interesting, but I mean, Willie has so many bullets to fire in every department. I mean, he can afford to keep him over hurdles if he wants to. Yeah,
isn't it amazing that we're in the third week in March now, and I think everyone would agree we're still absolutely no nearer knowing who is the best 2 mile hurdler around. It's astonishing, isn't it, that we can get this far into the season. We don't quite know where we are with Constitution Hill. More on him in a minute. Stateman looks back reasonably close to On Song. Lossymouth, more of her in a moment. And we're even starting to think that, a novice could have shaken up the champion hurdle picture. But in an ideal world, we would see Constitution Hill, Lossymouth, Stateman, and Golden Ace all squaring off for the championship at Punchestown. But what chance of that, fellas? What do you think?
Personally, I think very slim. But I'm going to speak about Lossymouth in a minute, because I think she might go a different route. I can't see Golden Ace coming to Punchestown. I don't think has even been mentioned yet, or has it? I didn't.
Yeah, no, it was mentioned on Sunday on Nick's show. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Well, it would be great if she did. And obviously, you'd love to see Constitution Hill come, but we've been there before with Constitution Hill. He's been supposed to be coming for the last couple of years, and we haven't seen him yet. So, let's see. Let's watch this space.
Well, let's go into the next segment. I think we're sort of covering the champion hurdle, but I think we've got to start off the shocks segment with that race, because it was just staggering, wasn't it, Ed, what happened?
It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. The atmosphere was extraordinary. And if you told me, Scoop, that was my one big wish for the week. If you told me that Constitution Hill was going to get beat, I'd have thought the whole place would be deflated. You told me Constitution Hill was going to fall, I would have thought the whole thing would have been pricked completely, but it wasn't. It wasn't. It was unreal. And then State Man coming down at the last and people's faces. Oh my God. And then you're thinking, you're on the floor. How do we pick ourselves up from this? And then it was the most surreal experience as the whole place took Jeremy Scott to their hearts. He was brilliant. He was so funny. And the crowd in the winners' enclosure just absolutely loved him. You heard the "Ooh, Jeremy Scott" reverberating around Cheltenham. It was bananas. It was bonkers, but it was also brilliant. And everyone was elated by it, despite the fact that Constitution Hill and State Man had come down. Brighter Days Ahead was a huge disappointment. State Man, the genius of Mullins, the vibe about State Man was so positive. I couldn't work it out. There was money for him. Willie was bullish about him. I thought, no, surely not. And he was absolutely spot on. But then fair play, and him with his "Only Fools and Horses" quote. Jeremy Scott was, again, one of the stars of the week. I had no idea he was like that at all. I've spoken to him a couple of times. I had no idea. He was so amusing, and he stole the show.
Well, the key to that bubble not bursting was the two high-profile horses getting up straight away from those falls, wasn't
right,
it?
Yeah.
Could have been very different, of course. But yeah, what to make of the champion hurdle?
But also, Scoop, you look at the fine margins. You mentioned the New Lion at the last. I mean, if you study that, there's about an inch between the New Lion and State Man, and look at the difference.
He's an excellent of the New Lion. He really is, isn't he? He has that really aggressive but accurate technique that's impressive. What about this Lossiemouth situation? I wanted to touch on something, fellas. It was something that I call him the Permatan Pro Punter, Mark Holder, said in his piece in the Racing Post this week, and it was about sort of fans having an opinion, and it just seemed. I'm going to try and get it up.
I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, here we go. Many people have moaned about the decision to run Lossiemouth in the Mare Hurdle. But my view is that when they, owners, have a long and successful career in business and then decide to plough millions into the sport, they can decide where each horse should run. Of course they can. Listen to this. Until then, racing fans should be thankful that the likes of Richie decide to invest in racehorses as opposed to super yachts in the Med. Lossiemouth's win last week was nothing more than a school round in a slowly run race. And while it's likely she'd have won the champion 40 minutes later as things transpired, it's very easy to call that after the event. Had she instead finished a decent second to Constitution Hill, I, for one, would have been questioning Connection's sanity for not taking the easier option. How about this question, Mark? What would you have said if they'd run her in the champion and she'd won?
Question. I mean, this debate as well, it's not going to go away for now, is it? But I do think we need to address it. My personal opinion is that the option of the mares shouldn't be there. And I don't think anyone would argue with Connections having the right to do what they want, but I just don't think the option should be there, because you're taking away the best hurdlers from taking each other on with a different alternative on the same afternoon. So that would be my opinion on it. But Billy, you had something to say about Lossiemouth?
First of all, on the Mayor's Hurdle debate, I'd agree with GC's suggestion. I think the likes of a Lossiemouth should have to carry a penalty in a race like that, which would, to some degree, level the playing field. But my theory about Lossiemouth, and I don't know, it may or may not happen, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see her running in the Stairs Hurdle at Punchestown. I just thought the way that she finished out the race the last day, she was obviously very strong at the finish. I take the fact that it was a slowly run race. It wasn't a real test of stamina, but she was absolutely cantering up the hill. There's no way. She certainly wasn't stopping. And this is the thing that Willie has done in the past. Obviously with Q Vega, she used to regularly come from the Mayor's Hurdle at Cheltenham to the Stairs at Punchestown. But when you look at the Stairs at Punchestown, you'll have the likes of Bob Ollinger, you'll have the likes of Tehupo. 3 miles around Punchestown on quickish ground, as it's probably going to be that time of the year. It's not a real thorough test either. We've seen the likes of Classical Dream, who didn't ever really stay 3 miles at Cheltenham, but he used to get it at Punchestown really well. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's the route Willie takes with her. I don't know, though. This is just me speculating. But obviously, if State Man is in the whole of his health, which, touch wood, he will be, he will go for the champion hurdle at Punchestown. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Lossiemouth is rerouted to the Stairs, because I think it's a race she could win.
I thought the Brass Neck Award of the week went to what's his name, Mr. Maloney, who's connected with the Honeysuckle team.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Jade de Grugy second to Lossiemouth. Jade de Grugy lost a jockey and lost a chance to win once Lossiemouth came into the scene. Having a grumble about the top mares running in the mares race when they did it twice with Honeysuckle. Brass neck award, Maloney.
It's amazing how different your view can be from the second spot as opposed to the winner's enclosure, isn't it? But just going, now we're still on the mare's hurdle. I think it's less of a mare's problem. It's the Willie Mullins problem, isn't it? And it's because he's got such strength in depth. He can put horses in slots that others wouldn't. And we saw it as well, obviously, in the county hurdle with that Cargisi. Now, the vast majority of people, if they had a horse like that, they'd have been running her in the mares. Now, Willie was able to save her for the county because they'd already got Jade de Grugy in the same silks. And you look at the way that the mares hurdle, I think there's been 11 runnings of that as a grade 1. So it was first run in 2015 as a grade 1. And since then, there's been 5 times that a mare has won the champion hurdle. So the very best mares are still going for the champion hurdle, despite it being a grade 1. And it's just the ones where there's other options. And even Annie Power, when she won the champion hurdle, she had to be supplemented because it was plan B, because Forheen got injured and wasn't going to run. So we can talk about, I think there's a serious danger that we could end up getting rid of the mare's hurdle, and all those mares that are being persevered with and the breeding to suit these, you end up throwing all that out. And you're actually ignoring what the real problem is. And it's just the strength and depth of one stable that just isn't going away, whatever you do.
So we've veered off slightly from the shock segment. That's my fault there. But we'll get back into it by talking about Masborough being beaten in the Arkle GC.
Yeah, I watched it again yesterday, and he's young, isn't he? He's 5. He's only had a handful of races overall. And he's over bold at times. When he gets it right, he is a magnificent sight. He leaps out, 3 meters out the other side of the obstacle. But that comes at a price. And 2 Out was his nemesis last week. He did tremendously well to get so close in the end. So he remains a formidably precocious talent. But we'll come to Ballyburn in a minute. In Masborough and Ballyburn, Willie Mullins now faces a real test of his training skills to get grade 1 horses, superior runners, jumping consistently well enough to be the very best.
Okay, well, we've covered Galloping de Champs, I think.
Just on that, Scoop.
I know the way you're thinking. Sorry, go on.
Just on that, Scoop, I think you raised a really interesting point about 5-year-olds in the Arkle GC, because I think that's 16 in the last 20 years in the Arkle, and they've all got beat. And that second last was so costly for him. I mean, that's the one that I must admit really hurt, because Django Bay wouldn't be fit to lace Sergino's boots. Honestly, you wouldn't even work them together. And I feel sorry for Gavin Cromwell as well. His mare pricked her ear. She thought she'd won. Yeah. Harry Skelton thought he'd won at some point. Masborough is definitely the best horse in that race, in my opinion. And Django Bay won it. Yeah. Honestly, it was extraordinary. And Django Bay really should have run. He'd have had, 3 runners in your Turners if that had existed. That was his race, Billy.
Well, I think a few of those Arkle horses might be going out into it, might they? Masborough certainly, and the winner, we will see. Yeah.
Then Ballyburn's got a dual problem now, I think, hasn't he? There's that jumping issue, but what about the way he pulled early on? He was really, really ranked, head on the ground early on. I know he's carried his head low before, but that horse had a really quite a grueling experience last week, Billy, didn't he?
I think tactics backfired, GC. I think they tried, first time at 3 miles, and they thought they'd have to hold him up in order to get the trip. But certainly looking at him last week, he just wants to get on with it, no matter what distance he's going. And I don't think we'll see him being held up again. I think next time out, he'll be just let off and let do his own thing, because he's a much happier horse when he's in front. He settles better. He'll give himself more of a chance of staying. Now, whether he'll ever get 3 miles, we don't know. Last week was absolutely inconclusive. But he clearly just wasn't concentrating properly in behind horses. He was trying to pull. His jumping fell apart because of it. It wasn't his running at all. But yeah, it's it is a test of Mullins now to see what he'll do with him. How will he get him back on track? Obviously, I'd assume we'll see him at Punchestown. There's a possibility we might even see him at Fairyhouse because there's a good gap this year. He could go for that 2.5 mile Grade 1 at Fairyhouse. So it'll be interesting, but certainly next time we see him, expect him to be out in front and making the running, because I think that's the only way to ride him. And we found that out last week.
The ditches definitely found him out last week. Two of the ditches on the first circuit, he just looked super windy.
Yeah, it's like his confidence was definitely knocked. So it'll be very interesting to see how he gets on next time. If he jumps like that again, there's always the possibility he'll be back over hurdles next year.
I was going to say, Billy, that could be a big possibility, couldn't it, coming back to maybe a state hurdle division next year?
It could be, yeah, it could be. I mean, he's not going to win a Grade 1 over fences jumping the way he jumped last week, so something's going to have to change. And like I said, if the change of tactics doesn't work, then there is the option of bringing him back to hurdles.
Yeah, Ballyburn firmly in the disappointment segment, and I'm going to have to put Jonbon in there as well. Let's just discuss what happened to him in the champion chase, David.
Just did what you can't do in them 2 mile races. You met one all wrong, and it was literally a chance-ending mistake, wasn't it? We know from some of his form earlier in the season that he probably is better than Marine Nationale. Even if I think you can look at that Ascot form though and start to ask questions whether it's quite as good as what it looked. Obviously, Energumene running on slightly quicker ground, and I think he might have come back with a physical issue. But I don't think Edwardstone has done too much for the form. But you go back to Quilixios and where he finished in the Tingle Creek and how far Jonbon was ahead of him compared to where he would have finished against Marine Nationale if he'd have stood up in the champion chase. And I think it's perfectly fair to think that Jonbon at his best is still probably at least 3 or 4 lengths the best. But, it's jump racing. You've got to get everything spot on. There's just no margin for error. And when you get one wrong, you pay the price. And that's what he did, unfortunately.
It was the start as well. I mean, McCoy and Fitzgerald twice, really. Galopin Des Champs, they said he can't win this after they'd gone about 50 yards. He then surprised them second time at the top of the hill that he was still in the mix. What a brave horse he is. But they also said, as soon as they started, Jonbon on the back foot, it's over. They said that long before anything else happened.
If you look at the freeze frame of that start, lads, I mean, I'm not digging the starter out here. It had been a traumatic day and a half already. But I think there were 9 runners. You have a look at the freeze frame. They are pointing in all bloody directions, all with noses over the tape. And I do the hard yards, so you don't have to, as you know. So I've listened in on the BHA briefing this morning. I asked the question. There were a lot of, blah, 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 blah. I asked the question, are you wedded to this system whereby after one false start, you have to have a standing start? And I got the answer, everything is under review, etc. But those standing starts are not... They're inferior, aren't they? They're inferior to the original one. So why are we still going with that?
Fit for purpose, I think, is the technical term.
Sorry?
Not fit for purpose.
Yeah. Jonbon was facing a 45 degrees. The tape whipped across his nose, and it was all downhill thereafter.
He's just not the sort of horse that takes well to any sort of little setbacks like that, is he, Jonbon? He needs everything just to go his way. He's got a few quirks, but the starts were unsatisfactory all week long, really, and that certainly needs to be under review. Right then, we're going to finish the podcast with the final 2 segments, the spring and the next festival. So first of all, gents, I want something for Aintree or Punchestown that you saw running last week. There'll be plenty to go, even though there's a bit of a quick turnaround between Cheltenham and Liverpool. So, David, I'll come to you first. Have you got anything for the spring?
Yeah, well, the one that stands out to me is Factor File going to Punchestown. Ed was talking there about how much better he's potentially going to be right-handed, and I think he'll be at least as effective there. We know how good he is at Punchestown. He won the John Durkan there, didn't he, on his reappearance? Obviously, that was 2.5, but I don't think I'd be concerned about going back up to 3 miles at Punchestown. We know Punchestown has been a bit of Achilles heel for Galopin Des Champs in the spring there, hasn't it? So I'd be very confident that Factor File, if he goes for the Punchestown Gold Cup, even if it means he's taking on the Gold Cup winner as well, I'd expect him to come out on top there.
Yeah, you sort of get the feeling that we might have seen. I know the way you're thinking for the season, don't you? I'm not sure if he'll even run at Punchestown. We will see. Billy, have you got one for the spring?
I've got two out of the handicaps, Scoop, for the spring and possibly even into the summer. I thought Ethical Diamond ran a cracker in the county hurdle, came from an awful long way back to finish fourth, doing his best work at the finish. There's definitely a big handicap hurdle in him, possibly Galway, if they hang on to him for that long. But I do think he'll win a big 2 mile handicap hurdle somewhere. And over fences, Nürburgring, I thought he'd run well in the Jack Richards, and he did. He finished fourth, staying on really well at the finish. Again, I think he has a bit of unfinished business in races like that. There's a very valuable novice handicap chase at the Punchestown Festival that would look ideal for him. I think it's 2-5. But again, he won the Galway Hurdle last year, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him back for the Galway Plate this time around over 2-6. So I think the two of them, I certainly think there's a big race in both of them, hopefully, before the year is out.
Yeah, he ran well, Nürburgring. He didn't jump that well, did he, in the early stages? But
yeah, he's a bit sticky still. His jumping is a work in progress, shall we say, and was probably the way the race turned out. He was just a bit too far back, but he was staying on well at the finish. So I do think there's more to come from over fences.
GC, spring horses?
Right. That's a quick question. Are we also doing something for next year's festival as another little segment?
That's the final segment.
Okay. Well, this might be spring into summer. Have you had a look at Wadou's handicap mark on the flat?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
4 runs on the flat. She was a Sir Michael Stout horse for what are they called? The old Trev colours. What are that firm called?
Cab.
She only had 4 runs. She's rated 71. She won a highly competitive Martin Pipe off 141 pulling a bus last week. So Gordon Elliott can do some damage on the flat with her. I'm certain of that. And one other quick news line that I wanted to add in. Whip, Ed, hardly got a mention.
Yeah.
Rightly so. A handful of 1-over offences last week by the pros. Not one single British professional jockey suspended for use of the whip last week. Now, Billy, I know you're going to say that's because they weren't involved in the bloody finishes.
Look the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, that's a hat tip to the BHA. The odd one day and a couple of amateurs, but overall a successful day on that front. But we'll come back to next year's festival with another Elliott horse. But keep an eye when Gordon lets Wadou loose on the flat. Look out.
That is a good spot. Ed, have you got any?
There were some brilliant finishes. That's a great point, that, GC. There were some brilliant spectacles, weren't there, those finishes? And that was probably part of it. My favourite race of the week was the Turners. I thought that was spectacular, those 3 horses at the front. But the Triumph wasn't far behind. I mean, they were motoring in the Triumph, and those camera angles with the 3 of them going at it, the right horses as well, plus Poniros. I do think Lalamba's a really nice horse, And he was very weak in the market on the day, which was disturbing. And he didn't jump anything like as well as I thought he was going to, particularly 2 out, which was very costly. But he's one for the future, Lalamba. Might be one for Aintree with the race that Gino won last year. I think Lalamba's a really, really nice horse. And Vanilla, honestly, going to Aintree, that horse is in rare form at the minute. Cromwell's got that horse in a really good place. And I think he's in better form than when he's gone there in the past. And I think he's going to run a big race in the Nash.
What was your annoyance, Ed, that his jockey tried to take the wrong course?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he lost. I mean, how many lengths did he lose doing that and momentum and everything else? And he was absolutely loving it.
Would have won it, wouldn't he?
And then flying at the finish. Yeah, he's in rare form going to Aintree, that horse.
Okay, well, the Cheltenham Festival is just finished for 1 year, but we're going to finish our Cheltenham coverage by looking ahead to 2026, 12 months in advance. And GC, I can see you chomping at the bit, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, sometimes, you see a price and you'd think, what am I missing here? There's something wrong. I agree that the Turners looked a high-quality race. Final Demand is a horse with loads of big days ahead of him. So is the new one. Not the new one, the New Lion. They'll probably go in different directions, but splitting them, very strong in the market, travelling beautifully, jumping really well. The Yellow Clay ran a screamer. He's developing into a really high-class young horse. And he's 33-1 with a few firms for next year's Arkle. I can't understand that. Because if he goes chasing, he's going to be a leading contender for Grade 1 novices. So it's a bit of a speculator, but at 33-1, I wouldn't put him any bigger than 8 or 10 myself.
I like that a lot.
Is that because they think he might go out in trip for the Brown Advisory, or...?
Maybe, but we've seen from Django By and plenty of others in the Arkle that stamina is never a bad asset to have. And if you're wanting to get away from Final Demand, who I think will be a high-class novice chaser, I think we'll see him again soon. The Yellow Clay, I think we'll see him at Aintree or Punchestown, and I think he'll have a very good chance of winning his Grade 1 over hurdles, another Grade 1, because he's got one already, hasn't he?
DJ 2026?
Yeah, there's one I've actually backed already, and it was after Henry de Bromhead did confirm pretty much the inevitable that the Big Westerner will go over fences next year. Thought she ran a really good race in the Albert Bartlett, which has obviously been a real good trial for the Broadway down the years. And she didn't quite have the best of luck, did she? She got caught in a little bit of traffic just as the winner was beginning to make his way for home. And I mean, there's talk about that she probably needs softer ground now. It probably won't be any quicker next year than what it was on when she ran on Friday, will it? And she absolutely fine there. So if it happens to come up softer, all the better. But I think the Big Westerner, she's still a best price 16-1 for the Broadway, and I think you could easily see her going off near favourite if she gets there with everything gone to plan next year.
Okay. Ed, have you got one?
Yeah, also from the Albert Bartlett, actually, Scoop, and it's going to be a Brit. I'm going to go for a Brit, because I think the most worrying thing to come out of next week, if we're trying to turn a corner, is having one runner in the Supreme and none in the Brown Advisory. That's deeply, deeply depressing.
Yeah, it is.
And the horse I backed in the Albert Bartlett, I thought ran a cracker, but I just thought Paul Townend outrode them all, where he went and how he rode the race. I'm thinking, why are you on that side? It's Derry Hassan Paddy, who I thought ran an absolute screamer in the Albert Bartlett. I just wish he'd come up the near side, and he just screams chaser. If you see the size of him, the trainer describes him as a monster. Obviously, she's got Myertown, but she talks in totally different ways about Derry Hassan Paddy. And heart and head, I hope he's one for the future and one for 3 miles over fences.
And final word goes to you, Billy.
Well, first of all, I want to touch again on Poneros, because yes, he was 100-1, but that was an amazing performance by a horse having his first run over hurdles. We haven't run into 150 plus, which I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but I can't imagine there have been many, if any, horses have run to that rating first time out over hurdles in their careers on the time form rating. So where he goes, it's going to be fascinating to see how his career develops over hurdles. But like the other lads, I was paying tremendous attention to the Albert Bartlett, as we all seem to have been. And I just think Jasmine DeVoe, if he comes back for the Stairs hurdle next year, like, he can't really jump hurdles. I don't imagine there'll be too many putting up their hand to school him over fences at William Mullins. He's pretty clumsy. And looking back at the Albert Bartlett again, he didn't jump particularly well through the Albert Bartlett. But the fact that there's only 3 hurdles in the last mile was a big help to him. His best jump in the entire race was at the last, and he was never stronger than at the finish. So, like, stamina is clearly his strong suit. I'd love to see him staying over hurdles, and that's not a division that's going to get much deeper than it is at the moment, and it's not strong now. So if they stick to hurdles with him, they may or may not, but if they do, he could be a major force in that division for years to come, I think.
Yeah, and he's 14-1 for the Stairs hurdle, which looks a fair price with Tube, who's 6-1 favourite, 12 months in advance. So
I'd much prefer to back him at 14 for a Stairs hurdle than a similar sort of a price for a Brown Advisory, because, you know, he's jumping is not his friend at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Billy. Thanks, DJ.
Have you got one, Scoop?
No, I haven't got one, Ed. I would have had Jasmine DeVoe, I must admit. I completely agree with Billy. I thought 14 is pretty big for the Stairs hurdle, because it's got a hell of an engine. Can't jump, but hell of an engine, and that's what you need in the Stairs. So, yeah, I'll just double down on him. That's it. We're done. Cheltenham done for another year. Thanks, guys. Enjoyed that. I'm not back next week because I'm on holiday, but Dave Ord will be back next week, and you'll be discussing the flat season because the Lincoln Handicap is on its way. So thanks.
When I saw the running order for today, I thought, why are we not doing the Lincoln? I just assumed the Lincoln would be this weekend.
Yeah, no.
DJ back in his element.
Another 10 days to wait, DJ. We're nearly there. So, yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. See you again soon.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion, and tips.